afternoon, everyone. I welcome you to this lecture on resume writing. So while discussing this topic of resume writing, I'll be dividing it into sections. As is always the case, I'll be starting with the basic definition of a resume, and then I'll be shifting on to different components, different parts of resume. But before I start with the definition, I'd like to draw your attention towards the pronunciation of this word. In English, there's a word resume, and we pronounce the word as resume. Now, when we talk about this particular topic, is it resume writing, or is it, the way I pronounced it, resume writing? I've been interacting with students for around 10 years now, and I've come across students who are very adamant that it is resume. The logic that they give to me is that in English there is a word resume, and we don't say he resumed his work. We say he resumed his work. So how can it be resume writing? The answer to this is that this word here has roots in French, so it is resume writing. Another related word is a CV. Full form of CV is curriculum vitae. Another common mistake which students make, they mispronounce it as YT. It's not YT, it's curriculum vitae. So now let's start with the definition of resume, and I'll try to clarify the point by differentiating between a resume and a CV. These two terms at times are used interchangeably, but there is a line of difference between the two. So resume is 1 or 2 page summary of person's most relevant job experience and skills. Now the important thing in this definition is the length, 1 or maximum 2 page summary, and then relevant job skills. So these two things are there. It will not talk about all the things that you have done in your life. It will talk about the skill set or all your experiences which are relevant to the job that you are seeking. Likewise, when we shift on to CV, the basic thing or the defining feature of CV is that it is a more detailed summary of all that you have done in your life for the purpose of obtaining an interview. So if we try to differentiate between a resume and a CV, we can say that CV will be a lot more detailed, so a number of pages can be more, and it will cover almost all the things that you've done in your life. In majority of the cases today, we opt for a resume because HR executives honestly do not have so much of time wherein they can go through detailed CVs of each and every candidate. So they want to have the most relevant of information which can be presented through a resume in 1 or 2 pages. Contents of resume. So we'll be starting with the heading first of all. So there are 4 components of a heading of a resume. So I'll be starting with the first one, or I should say I'll try to dictate it to you. Name should be there, that's the first thing. Address, the second thing. Telephone number, the third thing. And your email address, that is the fourth thing. Now the important thing about the heading of a resume, it should all be centrally aligned. Many times I've seen students write their resume and they left align everything, not the latest trend. And it, of course, if you opt for left alignment, it somehow harms the visual feel of the entire page. So your heading should be centrally aligned. 4 parts are there in the heading. So we start with the name. So the important thing, you have to mention the name that is there in your certificates. In the Indian context, many times people make this mistake. Now, on the certificate, for instance, surname is not there. And when people apply for a job, they write their resume, they write the complete name. The candidature will be rejected. Why? Because it will be assumed that the certificates do not validate your claim. Kindly remember this thing, that the name should be there, that particular name should be there, which is there in the certificates. Next thing, address. Now you have to use a permanent address. Now by permanent address, I mean that any address at which someone will be there to take the correspondence, to receive the correspondence from your future employer. If at all you give an address wherein someone might not be there, your future employer, he might try to send you a call letter maybe. You'll not be able to receive it or you'll not get the information. So give a permanent address there. Telephone number, the third thing. These days, mobile phones should be given because it has become very easy to contact people. But if at all a landline number is there, you use a landline number, then please don't forget to give the area code. You do not want your prospective employer to first of all look for the area code and then dial your number, then he should try to contact you. You do not want this to happen. The fourth thing in the heading of a resume is email ID. Now, email ID should be given for sure because it becomes very easy for your future employer to contact you. But which email ID should you give? I might be having up to 3-4 email IDs, but I might not be in the habit of checking them regularly. So I should give the email ID which I check most often, because it's then only that there will be chances that the information that is sent to me by the prospective employer, I'll be able to check that. The other important thing about email ID should be very formal. Now, all of us at some point of our life have had those very informal email IDs. For instance, we end up using multiple digits in the email ID. Aryan 4 times 1, 2, 3 times 0. Such email IDs are to be avoided because it becomes tough for the employer or the HR executive to actually type in the correct email ID. The email ID should be formal, and if possible, if you get that email ID, it should be built around your name so that it's easier for the HR executives to contact you by sending the email. After the heading, the next important thing is objective. The important thing about objective, it should be to the point, not unnecessarily very lengthy. It should be over in a couple of sentences. If I end up writing the objective in 6 lines, 7 lines, that's not going to serve the purpose, because who has the time to read about my objective in 6, 7 lines, 8 lines? So it should be very to the point, crisp. It should not talk about things in very general way. What I've observed in my interactions with students is that students make one general objective and then they use it for every kind of job opening. So the objective remains the same. That has to be avoided. Your objective will change according to the job that you are seeking. Your objective should talk about what you can do for the company. That's one thing. But then there's some expectation on the part of the company also, and that will change from one company to the other. So your objective should be very simple, should be very concise, should be job specific, and it should highlight what you can do for the company. The next important thing related to objective, it should use action words which show that you did something in past. So such words should be used. The next important section is work experience in resume. Now, when we talk about work experience, the important thing to remember is that you should start with the most recent one. You should move backwards. For instance, if I'm in a job from, say, the year 2016 till present, I should mention it first of all. Then I should move backwards, say 2012 till 16, like this. This will show job continuity, and it becomes easier for the HR executives to find out the kind of work that I've done in various companies, because it will show how I've risen through the ranks during my career. Next up is education. In a resume, if I talk about myself, for instance, if I'm writing the resume, I'm supposed to talk about my educational qualifications, but again, in reverse chronological order. I need to start from master's, my graduation, plus 2 and 10. Normally, students in this section make this mistake that they start from 10th and then they move till their master's. So if at all you do this, again, it's something wrong. The logic that is given by students is that they're trying to show how they move from one degree onto the other degree. But that logic does not work. You start from the most recent one and then you move backwards. This is the trend, the way. Next up, co-curricular activities. All those extra things that you did in your life, and maybe in your student life, you need to talk about it, because this section will set you apart from others. There might be 10 people who have similar job experience, similar educational qualification, but they might not be having the same sort of experiences when it comes to extracurricular activities. So this section will actually tell the prospective employer what all extra you did and whether that will be of any help to him uh, or not. Next up, accomplishments. Now, while doing all these extracurricular activities, you might have achieved something. Don't be shy to talk about your achievements, because again, it is your achievements which will prove that you were able to do something extra and you were able to outperform others. So this means that you will give your will to work well for the company. You will be an asset for the company. Your hobbies and interests are a very optional part, because normally it is said that you talk about your hobbies only if they're directly related to the job that you're seeking. So you can leave this section. The next one, languages known. Try to mention all the languages that you know in your resume, because we live in a globalized world. So it's quite possible that your company, if not today, maybe in years to come, might be interested in sending you to represent it at some international platform. So if you know multiple languages, again, you'll be an asset to the company. The last section, references. You need to give references of two people who can give good feedback about you. But the important thing here is that you should first of all take consent of the people. If these people do not know that the HR executives of the companies might be contacting them for the feedback about you, then they might be taken aback when they get such a call, and then they might not be able to speak that well about you. So kindly take this precaution. After talking about the various components of resume, let's shift on to certain do's and don'ts, certain things that you should do while you draft a resume, and certain things that you should not do. So let's start with do's first of all. You should try to restrict your resume to one page. If it's absolutely necessary, shift on to the next page. Reason being, your resume will be talking about the most relevant of things. If you have been into a job for say 20, 25 years and you've achieved quite a lot, and when you talk about even the relevant things, the number of pages will increase. You can't do anything about it. But if you're a fresher, then please restrict it to one page. No one, no HR executive will like to go through 6 or 7 pages about you. So please, length is important. Uh, the other important thing, it should be very precise. The language used should be such that loose construction should not be there, and content-wise, it should be very concise. Because remember this thing, that HR executives are going to skim through your resume, and they are going to give maximum, say, of 30 to 45 seconds to your resume. If it is selected, shortlisted, then they might go through it in detail. Otherwise, they're just going to skim through it. So it should have the most relevant of things. As I stated earlier on, sentences should begin with action words. And in a resume, you should try to actually show that you'll be an asset to the company. So how can you do it? You should try to make a raw list of all the things that you can do, your skill set, and then you should try to link it to the needs of that particular job, needs of the company. You should not be very modest. The next thing, you should not be very modest when you talk about your achievements, because you are in a competition with other people. So you should try to talk about your achievements. You should try to highlight your achievements so that the other person has this impression that you are the most suitable person for the job. Uh, the important thing, the next point, kindly remember it. Stick to the past tense, even for description of jobs that you currently hold. I'll give you an example here. Recruited, trained, and managed sales staff, developed marketing strategies, prepared sales projections and established quotas, selected and contracted with overseas sub-agents to achieve international market penetration. So action words have been used and past tense have been used. I did not write that I recruit, train, and manage sales staff. I wrote recruited, trained, and managed sales staff. And I'm talking about, hypothetically speaking, I'm talking about the job that I currently hold. You have to print only to one side or at one side of the page. Kindly avoid printing at both sides. Uh, Font size should be not more than 12. Headings maybe 14, but kindly avoid it. 10 to 12 should be the range. Thorough proofreading should be done because nothing irritates a potential employer more than a grammatical or a spelling mistake. It's a formal document resume which represents you, so there should not be any kind of grammatical mistakes. So do a thorough proofreading, please. And I repeat, do a thorough proofreading. Read it multiple times. And make sure that you send your resume for the post where you're qualified to get a job. Many times we have this tendency that, all right, job has been advertised, and even if we do not meet the selection criteria, we are not qualified for it, we should try our luck. It's a very bad practice. Do not apply if you're not qualified for a job because you'll be wasting the time of the potential employer. He will not like it. Kindly avoid it. So, certain don'ts, important ones. Avoid decorative typefaces. Now, many times we have this feeling that we should use decorative typefaces to highlight stuff. Don't do it. It's a formal document. Use that formal font size, Times New Roman. Don't use the decorative typefaces. Glittering and colorful pages. You're not supposed to use such pages. The standard white sheet of paper, A4 size sheet, that should be used. Colorful pages are to be avoided. At times students say that can we use excessive shading to highlight stuff? No, keep it simple. Use just headings, no shading please. Try to avoid stapling or folding the paper. If you staple the paper quite a lot, it might actually damage the printed part. Don't do it please. The last thing, avoid too light or too dark printing. If you print it in a very dark way, even that's not going to give a good impression. And if it is very light, it might be very tough for the potential employer to go through. So that was all about resume writing, very briefly. So I highlighted about what a resume is, and I talked about the differences that are there between a resume and a CV. Then I shifted on to the various components of a resume, and then I shared certain do's and don'ts with slight overlaps. Thank you so much. Have a great day.